Psychoanalytic literary criticism. How's it going, everyone? Well, today we're going to be talking about psychoanalytic literary criticism. Now, what is that? Well, in order to understand what this is, there's three people that we have to understand. First of all, Sigmund Freud. Secondly, Carl Jung. And third of all, Karen Horney. Now, the first and probably most important person to this analysis is going to be Carl Jung. Now, who was Carl Jung and what did he do? Well, Carl Jung was a psychologist, and he was the father of analytical psychology. Now, in his travels, he went all around the world, and he looked for different archetypes and symbols of religious significance or mythological significance. Now, I'm going to draw an example of the unconscious mind. Now, in order to understand how these psychologists thought and their theories, we have to understand the mind. We have to understand what the mind is like. So there's a model that we have in psychology. It's called the iceberg model. Now, I'm going to illustrate this, and I think it'll show pretty well their theories on how the human mind was set up. Now, we have our water, and we have, we'll say this is an iceberg. Not the best artist, but this is an iceberg. Now, we have right here the tip of the iceberg, just a small part of the whole thing. We have to keep in mind this is the mind of humans. Now, what is this part of here? This is our waking consciousness. This is when we're awake, things that we're aware of. I'm aware that I'm holding this marker. I'm aware that I was writing on the board. These are the things I'm aware of. Now there's other parts to this. This is a conscious. Now this, everything below the water, is non-conscious. Now, first part of this, we have the subconscious, which is just right underneath. So the subconscious. Now, this is where things are organized. This is where we dream, which is actually very important in psychoanalytic literary criticism. So I'm going to write dreams. Now, the third and arguably the most important part of the mind model is the unconscious. Now, what is the unconscious? Well, the unconscious is the part of our mind that stores our forgotten ideas, forgotten thoughts. And also, this is where our repressed thoughts and memories occur. Now, we have our unconscious thoughts and memories, and we have our repressed, our forgotten and repressed thoughts and memories. Now, after this, there's two other parts to the unconscious mind. But before we get there, we have to know something very important. Everything in the unconscious mind is battling to get to the level of the waking consciousness. Everything here is trying to get up here. Now, as I was saying earlier, there's two parts. The first part is the personal unconscious. Now, these are our thoughts, feelings, and repressions. Now, for each person has its thoughts, feelings, and repressions. Now, there's a second part to this, and the second part is a little bit more difficult to understand. It is the collective unconscious. Collective unconscious. Now, what is this? Well, this was the brainchild of Carl Jung, and what he said was that everyone in the whole world, it's kind of like a pool. Now, each person has a personal unconscious. What the personal unconscious is, we said earlier, it's our thoughts, it's our feelings, it's the events that happen to us that are repressed or forgotten, but that govern our way of acting. They govern how we respond in specific situations. Now, each person's personal unconscious is essentially in a pool. Personal unconscious of me, and personal unconscious of you, and the personal unconscious of Chris, and the personal unconscious of everyone in the whole world. Now, this personal unconscious, all these personal unconscious together constitute the collective unconscious. Now, Carl Jung traveled all around the world, and he was trying to find archetypes. He was trying to find things that were consistent throughout each person's personal unconscious. So people in, say, a tribal culture would have a slightly different personal unconscious than people in a more urban area. Each person has a different personal unconscious because we each experience different things. But what he did was he went and he looked throughout various cultures. He traveled all around the world, and he was trying to find similarities among all of these. He was trying to find similarities or archetypes. And symbols. Now, he did this, he looked at myths and religion, religious symbols, and what he did, as I said before, he tried to find common themes. Now, so in a sense, we would share a common response to a situation. And these archetypes helped him try to figure out, well, what those situations were, and that's how we would respond to them. Now, because we have a collective unconscious, we all unconsciously apply these things, these archetypes, these thoughts and feelings that are repressed. We unconsciously apply them to our work. These are unconsciously applied to art, theater, and most importantly for our analysis, to literature. Now, this is what we're focusing on. So Jung, he took all of this. He said everyone has a collective, we all share a collective unconscious. And from this collective unconscious, there are symbols that we unconsciously apply to our work, to our art, to our theater, to our literature, which we can all understand. And we are studying in psychoanalytic literary criticism the effect of all of these archetypes, all of these symbols on literature, both from the author to the literature and within the characters in the literature. And this is what makes psychoanalytic literary criticism so interesting, is because we're not just dealing with the events that occur in the book, we're taking it to the psychological level, the interior of the characters, so far that they may not even be aware of. So this is literary criticism, this is psychoanalytic literary criticism. Now there's a second part, and Sigmund Freud took part in this. Sigmund Freud had another theory of personality. This was probably the most common, most people have heard of. It's a theory of the id, the ego, and the superego. Now, I'm going to draw this out again. Alright, so we have the id. Now, what is the id? The id is our basic drives, our desires. And these are totally uncontrolled. Totally uncontrolled. Now, the id is our drives and desires. They're not controlled. So this means that there is definitely desires uncontrolled id. Okay, so these are desires, our drives and desires that are uncontrolled. This is food, this is sleep, this is sexual desires, and everything. And this, they're not controlled. So these are just what we feel. We have a natural inclination. If I'm hungry, I want to eat, and I don't care where it is. I don't care the circumstances or the situation. I'm going to eat. But now we don't act. Normally, we don't act impulsively. So there's another part of the personality that keeps this id in check, and that is the super ego. Super ego. Now, the superego is kind of also known as our conscience. And what the superego is, it's kind of a set of rules or guidelines to keep it in check. They say we can't just eat whatever we want because it's not right. You know, we can't just eat wherever we want, sleep wherever we want, because then we're not going to have time to do other things that we need to do that are necessary. The id says we can't, just have sex whenever we want, because there's morality involved. And so this is also morals. So now, essentially, this is kind of one extreme to the other. This is strictly rules, nothing else. And this is strictly do whatever you want. Now, I think most people wouldn't find themselves in either situation. So there's a mediator. And the mediator is the ego. Now, the ego provides a balance. It helps us say, I'm not going to eat whatever I want. But, at the same time, it tells us, I'm not going to act impulsively, but I'm not going to follow all these rules. I'm going to follow the ones that I see are fit to be followed. Now, the ego also has another function. It serves as a channel. So it's kind of a decision factor, but also it's kind of a channeling factor. So what does that mean? Okay, well, let's say you decide you're hungry and you have to eat. I mean, you're hungry. When you eat, there's nothing wrong with eating. So, but your id would tell you, eat whatever you can, eat whatever's in sight. Don't pay attention to anyone else or anything else. If you're eating someone else's food, that's okay. If you're eating your food, that's okay. If you're eating food out of the trash can, that's okay. Now, what your ego says is, okay, you're hungry. It says you're hungry. Your ego says you can eat. Your superego says you can eat. And your ego says, okay, well, this is what you need to do. You're going to go to your house. You're going to go to the refrigerator. You're going to take out your food. You're going to put on the stove. You're going to cook it. Then you're going to sit down at your table and you're going to eat them. That's the proper way to go about fulfilling the id. So it's channeling the id properly. Now, this is very important in psychoanalytic literary criticism because important psychoanalytic literary criticism because each character has these, and oftentimes they emphasize certain aspects of this. One character may act extremely impulsively, not care about anything but themselves and their desires, and they will do anything to fulfill them immediately. Instant gratification is what this is. You may have another character who is acting in a more responsible role, to the other extreme, where they won't do anything to break the rules. They're always following the rules. You may have a character that is struggling to balance between these, the id and the id and superego, and that would be a character who is focusing on the ego. You may have a character with all three who's very impulsive sometimes, but at other times they're very strict, they're very moral, and then sometimes they're kind of struggling with both of them, and sometimes they're fulfilling both of them. And these are very important because they show not only what their characters are doing, but it shows the motivation, the true motivation behind each one of the characters, and that's why this model is so important to psychoanalytic literary criticism, because we can apply it to the characters in the story, in the novel, in the novella, and we can see how they're thinking, what they're thinking by their actions. Are they fulfilling the id? Are they fulfilling the id? Maybe if they are, then maybe that symbolizes a culture of selfishness or self-satisfaction. Are they fulfilling superego? A religious culture, maybe? A culture where it falls around God? Could it be that? Are they trying to decide between whether to live between fulfilling the id or fulfilling the superego? Could that be living out the ego? Maybe. These are the types of things that we talk about, that we explore when we're talking about psychoanalytic literary criticism. This is why this model is so important. Now, there's one final psychoanalyst we haven't talked about yet, and this is Karen. Now, Karen Horney did a lot of work with a psychological occurrence known as neurosis. Now, what neurosis is it's essentially a form of a coping mechanism. Now, what is a coping mechanism? Well, a coping mechanism is a way that we deal with the situation. So, way it's a way to deal with a situation. Now, neurosis is oftentimes the way that people deal with the situation is not very hard. But now, Karen Horney, Karen Horney talks about there's 10 ways that people cope with a problem. Now, before I do this, let's say we have a problem. Let's say there's a child. Let's say they're 8 years old. Now, let's say they're a teenager. 13 years old. Now, this teenager, all throughout their life, they don't feel loved by mom and dad. Don't feel loved by mom and dad. So now, Karen Horney says there's 10 ways that a child will cope with this. Okay. Now, these ways, I'm not going to go through all of them, but let's say one of the ways is compliance. Say, okay, you know what, there's nothing left to do, I guess, so I'm just going to do it whatever they say. I'm going to do whatever they say. So, okay. Now, another way may be anger. Mom and dad aren't giving me enough love, so I'm gonna get mad. There may be an aspect of self-controlling. Control freak. Now, why is this important? I think that most, if not all, of the actions of characters, of even ourselves, we can somehow fit into one of these categories. Not necessarily these three, but the list that, that she gives us. Now, all of these, very possibly illustrate an event that has happened in the life of one of the characters or of the author, and that is possibly reflected in the book. So, let's say there's a child. We use the example of a child, and their parents died. So where is this? It's over here. So mom and dad died. So now that they're in the book, this is a character in the book. Right? So their mom and dad have died, and they feel, and their action is, and they're very, let's see, what's another good one? Compliance. Let's say compliance. Okay, let's say they're very compliant towards everything. Well, how could you draw, honestly, how could you draw a parallel between someone just being compliant and their parents dying? Well, that is what this theory says. It would say that the compliance of the character is linked, if not, is directly linked to the parents having died. They weren't there. In other words, the effects of their parents not being there for them have formed this trait, this compliance, or anger, or controlling, or there's any type of emotion or attitude can be linked to a coping mechanism. So we have to see what events happened in the past or have happened to the character. They could have caused these emotions. Now this is how we apply this form of this is how we apply this theory to psychoanalytic literary criticism. Now, dreams are very, very significant both in the psychological world and in the literature world. Now, dreams occur in our subconscious, as you said before. Now, Sigmund Freud wrote, I believe it was in his book on the interpretation of dreams, that he believed in dreams a lot. That the subconscious, was a gateway, that the dream, was a gateway into the subconscious. So Sigmund Freud believed that the dream was a gateway into the subconscious. Now, all this was a gateway into the unconscious. Excuse me. Now, as we said before, the unconscious is trying to get up here to the conscious. Now, because of this, the dreams are here. Now, dreams sometimes reflect suppressed thoughts and memories, as well as conscious thoughts and memories. But dreams, dreams, they often help us see things as they are, and there's very symbolic events and occurrences that go on in dreams. Also, we've seen in psychology, as a child, we desired our mother. No. That's scary. Okay, as a child, we desired I'm just gonna say we want mom. Now, also as a child, we are trying to get past angry at dad. God, that's muscle. Because he's keeping us from getting to mom. Right, this is basically what, and this is for boys to keep in mind. There's a very similar, almost identical complex, except it's opposite with girls, and that's called the electric complex. We're just talking about this one for now. So as an adult, the child seeks wife, his mom, because he so the emphasis comes like this. Well, this might sound a little bit strange, but this is actually not very. This complex may sound a little bit strange, but this can be applied to psychoanalytic literary criticism. Because if a person desires someone, if a person desires another, let's say a boy, a male character, if he desires a female character, it could reflect, according to Freud, that it is really his desire for his mother. So is it possible that we could conclude that the stronger the desire for a woman, the stronger the desire for his mother? It's possible. It's possible. In Freud's theory. Now, there's several ways that we can interpret dreams. It was Freud that said that dreams are the gateway into the unconscious. Okay, that's pretty brilliant. Now, there's another man, Carl Jung. This guy does everything. Now, Carl Jung, he also focused a lot on dreams, and this was part of the reason for his archetypal search, his archetypal quest, I guess you could say, throughout the whole world. Now, when we talk about the unconscious, we're talking about, I'm going to redraw this iceberg, simpler version. This is where Jung said that we have our collective unconscious. I'm just going to abbreviate that CU. Now, in our collective unconscious, we have all of our archetypes and our suppressed thoughts and ideas. But this is for throughout the whole world. So what Jung tried to do was he tried to basically create universal archetypes. And he would travel from culture to culture, to tribe, to city, to civilization, and he would say, okay, this symbol, I've seen it before, so then he might mark that down as possibly universal archetypes. So he'd keep traveling and try to find more symbols, mythological or religious, and he would, I suppose, record them. Now, if this statement is true, then dreams are the gateway to the collective unconscious. Therefore, these archetypes that he finds, these archetypes are revealed in dreams, according to him. Now, we said that the archetypes from the whole world, at least that he found, were reflected in literature. However, they can also be reflected in dreams. Not only dreams that we have, according to his theory, but in dreams of characters in books. Now, this is a part of psychoanalytic literary criticism that is extremely interesting, in my opinion, because it takes not only what the characters are unaware of, even what the author is unaware of in their unconscious, what they're unconscious of. It takes the unconscious of the world as a whole, and it applies it to a specific situation by means of their dreams. I think that is extremely interesting and unique and very meaningful when it comes to psychoanalytic literary criticism.